Baseball is king when it comes to cliches and old adages. What those old adages do not count on, however, is guards ball, and neither do the Tigers.
Tanner Bibee of the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I want to quickly give a shout out to Everydayer Emily CK, who had a great stat that I'll bring up later in the podcast. But first, this episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, Booking.yeah, the right state can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today.
On today's Locked On Guardians, we, of course, discuss Game 1. I don't know what anything you could have predicted could have ever given you the inclination that the Guardians would score 5 runs before recording an out, but we'll discuss that. We'll talk about what we learned from Game 1. We will take a quick look at the Guardians roster decision since we haven't talked since the Guardians roster for the ALDS was announced, and we will, of course, talk about key matchups and what to watch for in Game 2 today.
Hello, everyone. My honoring last week is Mel Harder, who threw the ceremonial last pitch at Cleveland Municipal Stadium in 1993 on October 3rd. So I thought I'd throw that out. Before I explain who I am, everyone's favorite part of the show, I am Jeff Ellis, one of your two co-hosts, one of the original hosts of Locked On MLB of any show on the network. For that, I was nationally recognized as a scout, not scout, as a prospect and draft writer, scouter, however you want to label it, at Scout in 24/7. And before that, I was your 42nd favorite blogger at every Cleveland sports blog that has or will exist.
I can't think of anything for 42 besides Jackie Robinson or Mariano Rivera or Mike Jackson. Nah, those are the 3 numbers that I associate with 42, I suppose. Good company. I'm Justin Laddie, their co-host. I've been covering the Guardians minor league system since 2007 for places like Guardians Baseball Insider, the Morning Journal, and the News Herald, where I had plenty of interactions at one time with Travis Freeman, who threw out the first pitch at Game 1 on Saturday. Two of the most memorable interactions I've had with Travis Freeman, I cannot repeat on the air. I'll just say one was about a trade the Guardians made, I guess the Indians made in 2018. And the other one came from spring training this year when I was watching spring training. I cannot repeat anything he said on the air about that. The Tigers do not want to repeat anything from Game 1. Understandably so. The Guardians would love to repeat a lot of that. And
I would
Jeff,
like it too if they did.
Yeah. I again, like I said, I love trying to predict baseball because it's the one sport that is the hardest to predict. You can predict a lot of things in the NBA because you can assume that, you know, your LeBron Jameses and all that stuff. Those guys are going to have the ball in their hands when the moments matter, and they're going to, you know, dominate possessions and have the biggest impact on the game, you know, on the offense and defensive side. Football, you know, kind of the same thing. You know, guys like Patrick Mahomes are going to throw the ball a ton or run the ball a ton. Like, you're going to give your reps to the best player and let them dominate most of the game they can. In baseball, outside of pitching, you really can't do that. And that makes it harder to predict. I don't think it's like a lottery odds to try to predict 5 runs in the first inning, let alone not even record an out. I think that was the most important thing the Guardians did in Game 1. You know, Jeff, you were talking about how much you feel like momentum mattered for the Tigers and how much it is a thing. And they feel confident that they can do anything because they haven't failed yet. The Guardians, the first thing they did was Tanner Bibee, you know, worked through some issues in the first inning. We'll get into that in a little bit. But he maybe gave them some belief in the first inning by struggling with maybe some command early on. He hadn't pitched in 11 days, so that's not completely unexpected. But he was able to shut the door on them in the first inning, which is huge. And then the one thing we wanted the Guardians to do in Game 1 was put up a 0 on the top of the first, score runs in the bottom of the first, take early control. And that was the most important thing for them, I think, with the team like the Tigers coming in, who have a lot of belief and a lot of confidence, like we talked about on Friday. And Cleveland completely knocked them out of their toehold with 5 runs in the first inning. And at that point, you pretty much have the Tigers back on their heels and have control of the game. And I think that's so important to do to a team in the playoffs that has the kind of confidence level, like you said, the Tigers do. That was far and away the most important thing they could have done.
Yeah, I think just the way they took care of it, and that's the thing we talked about all year, right? Like this team, after years of struggle against lefties, all we've heard is, "Oh man, you're going to face all these lefties," and we're like, "It's such a small percentage." Well, they went out and threw a lefty, and this team went out and destroyed him. And they have a 26 higher, nearly 25% more offense against a lefty and a righty. I think it's not just that. I think back to the trade deadline and the number of people who got mad about that Lane Thomas deal. Is there anyone who's mad right now? Is there anyone? And we didn't get a chance to say this on the air, but like in retrospect, you and I were like, hey, this is something that the Padres and Cleveland have alike. They traded all of the recent prep arms while they're at peak value. It's an interesting approach to how they put this team together. And just to go out there and do what they did with Detroit. And then Detroit, I mentioned this too. It's like in that game, Casey Mize didn't make this roster. Kenta Maeda did not make this roster. Their big free agent addition. They did not have him in there. So Keter Montero and Reese Olson are 2 and 3 amongst players on their roster in terms of starts this year. And they both pitched in game 1. You can almost guarantee it's going to be Bo Brisky in the third game, but they faced Tarik. Let's see if I can get it right. Probably still got it wrong. Tarik. If you do not, you can go dig out. I have issues with pronunciation because of a disability. So cool down, Tigers fans. I understand every single episode you leaving 40 comments about pronunciation, but you're frustrated and I understand why. But right now it's like Skubal is fantastic, but the one time they faced him this year, they actually made a ton of contact. That's not necessarily something you can count on every time with as good as he is, but they do well against lefties. They're set up to face Skubal. It's and if it goes sideways, then it's 1-1, and then you're going with the next two games. They can't throw him. He would come back for game 5 if you can get to game 5, or he's got to come back on short rest in game 4, and then you do chaos, and the chaos didn't work. So yeah, it's I mean, you got to feel pretty good if you're a Cleveland fan. I don't know how you'd feel anything otherwise.
Yeah, the other point about the offense, like you and I were texting before the game about the lineup against this team, and it was thrown out there to be very
yeah, I didn't love it at the time. Shows what I know.
Well, we talked about maybe trying to hedge your bets a little bit, like maybe having Manzardo in the lineup and having someone like Noel on the bench. Even though Noel has struggled, at least you have the threat of right-handed power against left-handed pitching on the bench, because you knew that once Holton was out, you would see Herder and you would see Gunther. So you wanted to have something on reserve. Well, instead, they went with David Fry up at the top of the order early. They dropped Lane in the lineup, and they put Noel in the lineup. So they had no lefties, no platoon lefties in the lineup. You had was there any lefties in the lineup in that game 1? I don't think there was.
I'm trying to even think who it would have been.
Hitters. I'm sorry, Bo Naylor was in the lineup. Bo Naylor was your only guy in that lineup that was Jimenez. Why did I? And Josh Naylor. Okay, I'm just going to stop now.
It's all the the typical guys who were interesting.
Right.
But the funny thing is,
guys.
But the funny thing is, like Naylor and we talked about how good they've been this year. Naylor and Jimenez both came back to earth after being great against lefties in the past. So they're
Juan's a left-hander too. Okay. Ignore the last 30 seconds of what I said at this point. Anyway, they went with a lineup that favors hitting left-handed pitching, because that's what they do. And instead of, like you said, hedging their bets, having somebody in the lineup later, like they could have put Thomas in the 2-hole, start Fry, and then have I don't think having Will Brennan made any sense early on, because he doesn't hit lefties well, and you want to save him for defense if you need to. But they could have easily left one of Fry. They could have left Fry on the bench maybe and tried to pull him out later and move Thomas in the lineup. But they went for the ambush, and turns out that the Tigers already determined by the time you get to Lane Thomas, they were going to take out Tyler Holton anyway. And they did, but they already had scored, 2 runs at that point. He hadn't gotten anybody out. And then Lane Thomas comes up off in the first pitch from Reese Olson, ends up being a 3-run homer. So the ambush lineup worked. They hit lefties very well. They did it well. And then I also think offensively, scoring those 2 runs, David Fry getting that RBI double off of Ty Madden, was important too, because they went a couple of innings there without scoring a run, didn't have a whole lot of offensive opportunities, and they only had 7 hits.
Yeah, I mean, Olson responded and pitched quite well after the home run.
He did. Yeah, he only gave up 2 more hits after that and a walk. And then Ty Madden relieved him, and Ty Madden was not good. But I think it was important for them to score a couple of more runs. Like, yeah, they could have won this game 5-0. It wasn't a big deal. But you'd hate to think they scored all 5 runs in the first inning and then just completely shut down offensively the last 7 innings of the game.
Because momentum matters, and you want to see them keep that momentum flowing.
Yes,
right?
The confidence, right? It's the confidence. You want to not think that entire first inning was just about everything that happened and they caught the Tigers off guard, or I don't know what you want to say, but that was extremely important to get those runs later. We got to get to Tanner Bibee's first playoff performance. We got a couple more things from game 1, some goofy quotes. We'll get into the Guardians ALDS roster and how we feel about that, and then we'll get into keys and matchups for game 2 later on today.
But first, our good friends at Arena Club want you to know that for most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Luka Doncic and Ellie De La Cruz or Patrick Mahomes rookie card just isn't in the cards. I love collecting. You can see some collectibles behind me to show that. But that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of the retail price. Every card that I listed was a hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates. They are all about transparency. They want you to know what your hit rate is, what you could be getting, what you could be doing. That is their big push, being transparent. You know exactly the odds, and you know who is there that you might get in the repackage. So right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnMLB and use that code LockedOnMLB. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnMLB, code LockedOnMLB for $10 off your first purchase.
Check out our pal Sully, as always, over at Locked On MLB every single day, talking playoffs, off-season moves, all kinds of news, anything you can think of MLB storylines. You're going to get the national perspective from Sully without a lot of the uninformed takes you might find other places, and he does it with a lot of humor. Sully is a very funny guy. We enjoy him.
He won't be talking about Mitch Lively.
He will not be talking about Mitch Lively. He will not know. So check out our pal Sully over at Locked On MLB after you're done listening to us, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your sport every day. If you want to hear about Major League Baseball playoffs, let's be honest, Jeff. Nobody's going to take the time that we are, besides our good friends over at the Selby's Godcast, Zach and TJ, to talk about the Guardians playoffs anywhere, and MLB playoffs at that. So
what do you mean? Cleveland is well known for all of its talk radio during this time of year focused on baseball, because now, I mean, it should be that way, because listen, I am someone who gave up on the Browns a few years ago. I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to deal with that in the comments, but let's be honest, this is a team that has been the postseason 7 out of the last 10 years. At worst, it's 6 out of the last 10 years, whereas the Browns have made it, I believe, twice in the last 10. Like, one of these teams, October matters, and one of these teams, their season is always over in October. So it's kind of embarrassing to me in a way that, I live here in Milwaukee and I hear them talk about the Brewers all year, and I see fans supporting it all year. And then we have fantastic fans on this show, great everydayers who listen, follow through, and love it. And there's clearly a market for it. And one of the reasons we benefit is because those local places are not providing for the need.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain, but this is the place you're going to get it. So we're glad you're here. And
yep.
If you want the Tigers perspective, if you want the Padres, the Dodgers, the national perspective, we got it all covered for you on the network.
Mm-hmm.
Tanner, no surprise. There's always going to be butterflies. You're always going to have those playoff nerves. And he had them in the first inning. There were some, he dominated, I will say, that the first at bat. Like, it was a little bit long, but he dominated Parker Meadows. I thought he had
a few points, like when he was going over 95, even in that first at bat, like he was moving out of the zone. It took him a bit to fully settle in. Like, it didn't have to go quite as long as it did.
Here's my thing. I think that, yeah, maybe he missed high with the fastball. I think the game plan was for him to be up high with the 4-seam and change eye levels, show the fastball, because the Tigers have some good numbers against four-seam fastballs that we talked about last week. Historically, they struggle with fastballs in some ways, but they have a couple of players on this roster that do pretty well. Carpenter, Green, Meadows all have pretty good, on base averages against fastballs. I think the game plan for him was to be up at their eye level with the fastball. And, maybe he wanted to throw those fastballs for strikes, at the letters. But I think he wanted to be up there, and it took a while for him to be able to locate the way he wanted to with the fastball. But he settled in great. He had a good at-bat against Kerry Carpenter. Kerry Carpenter just beat him on a curveball. I would tip my cap to Carpenter on that first inning hit. But Bibee really
Carpenter
settled in.
Gets all right-handed pitching.
He does. He has great numbers this year. I think Tanner settled in great. You're always going to have those nerves. Like, these guys are human. Corey Kluber was like the only guy I can remember who made his first postseason start and just looked like he was just, again, that's why he hated the nickname. That's why people called him Klubot, because he was just a robot locked in. We know Tanner's a little bit different than that, and he used to be more emphatic on the mound. He's toned that down a little bit. I didn't really think he was overamped, honestly. I think it was just normal playoff nerves. I think the game plan was to be high with the fastball, but I loved how he settled in. I know people in our comments were saying, well, he only settled in because they scored those runs. I don't buy that.
I disagree with that as well.
It helps, agree. But we know how Tanner operates, and I thought the game calling was really good for the Guardians. I was worried about sequencing a little bit, but I thought their game plan was awesome. I thought Tanner attacked guys with sliders how he needed to. We saw the sinker come into play, which is something he has toyed with over the year, and we knew he was going to be bringing out at some point this year, and he hasn't really done it a ton, but he saved it for the playoffs. So early on, he showed the Tigers the sinker. It worked. Then he came back with the four-seam later, kept a couple curveballs in his back pocket. The changeups were there when he needed it. I thought he settled in perfectly nicely, and I expect him to be pitching this way the rest of the postseason, however long it goes. If hopefully he doesn't need to make another start in the ALDS, but I fully expect him to look this good again now that he's gotten this under his belt, and I trust that the game plan for him was as needed. I know he still threw 47% fastballs, which I was surprised by, but you saw enough sinkers that it was a fastball that took the Tigers hitters off the four-seam later, and he threw a ton of sliders. And I think they will also continue to vary his pitch mix, because the nice thing about Tanner is he does not a one or two pitch guy. He has a full arsenal he can go with, and he can change based on the matchup, and he can change based on what is working for him that day. And that's why I have a lot of confidence in him as the guy who's going to start the most important games in this postseason going forward.
Yeah, I just think he needed a chance to settle in a little bit. That's where you and I disagree. He has always been a high energy kind of kid out there, and we've seen a few games where he gets a little too overamped. I thought there were a few points, and that's why it was drifting a little higher than I agree with the game plan. But once he settled in, and I don't think it had anything to do with the runs. I think it was just going out there, experiencing the postseason, experiencing the energy from the crowd, and then finding success right away. He, in spite of being a little bit amped, he came out and was solid. I mean, he missed a lot of what was it? I'm going to get it wrong, but in my head, I'm thinking no, there's no way it was that high.
11 whiffs. That's 11.
Okay. I was thinking 13 whiffs. So I'm like, no, it couldn't be that high. So I was wrong anyways, but he was great. If you think he's anything other than great, I don't know what to tell you.
Absolutely. The other thing I really like about the pitching too is, and maybe I guess you can glass half full this or half empty this if you want, but I thought it was great, and maybe it didn't matter in the end, but I thought it was great that they went to their normal pitching lineup, right? Tanner was out. They got him out before he faced the top of the order a third time, which I think was the right call. You went to Cade, you went to Heron, you went to Gaddis, you went to Clase, the way you do it in the regular season, right? They were able to get Cade, Heron, and Gaddis their first postseason experience under very low pressure expectations, right? You had a 5-0 lead, 7 in some cases, and didn't really bring them in. Cade was the only one that came into traffic. The rest of them did not.
Yeah.
They made a great call later where Vogt had Heron staying in, and he forced AJ Hinch to go to Justin Henry Malloy to face Heron, and then Vogt decided to go to Hunter Gaddis after that, which means AJ Hinch had to pull back the pinch hitter of Malloy and bring in Wenzel Perez. So he burned 2 players for 1 at bat. I thought that was great by Vogt. So I would say it's good they got low pressure experience for all those couple relievers that don't have postseason experience. The rest of the bullpen does, right? You have, I mean, Walters doesn't, right? But you have Morgan and Class A have postseason experience. Maybe, like I said, maybe that's glass half empty. Maybe you want them to get the higher pressure situation experience, but I thought for your first outing, can't be bad for them to go out there, get the nerves out of the way, and go into that matchup, kind of in a low pressure expectation game.
Yeah, and like, I saw some people being like, "Oh, I don't like that he's, they're getting to see the Smith and get, that they got to see Guardians."
They saw him all year.
They saw him all year. They saw him and like the whole idea of seeing him isn't really as much a thing as people like. You know what? Great relievers. It doesn't matter how often you see him. You're still, everyone in Boston saw Mariano Rivera all the time, and guess what happened? Nothing. So yeah, it helps a little. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's completely worthless, but I think the bigger benefit is to the team that to getting those guys reps that needed it in the game setting, and you never know how someone's going to be in their first pro season experience. Shane Bieber had that rough outing after that fantastic 2020 season. Like getting those guys low pressure, it just eliminates that concern. Like, okay, now it's over and done with. It's easy. I think that is beneficial in some regards.
Not only that, but they also hadn't pitched since the previous Saturday.
Yeah.
So
no,
they had gone 6 days.
Oh yeah.
If they didn't pitch on Saturday in game 1, they wouldn't have pitched Saturday, Sunday. So you're talking 8 days without throwing a pitch in a game. I know they had the, sim games and all that kind of stuff in the scrimmages to keep them fresh, but they didn't have a real game situation to come into in a week. So they had to pitch no matter what. The other thing we're going to leave off game 1 on is, I guess the grounds crew won the game, according to
what a terrible
Tigers
quote.
Third baseman utility man Zach McKinstry. He said after the game that the grounds crew came up and watered the field before the infield practice or something and didn't come back. And he said it took a weird bounce. And he goes, and the quote went on to say, you hate that cost you the game. The Tigers didn't score any runs. Did he think the Tigers were going to win that game 0-0?
Apparently. Yeah, that, and like, listen, we love Zach, and I've talked about how I love Melissa, who was also at the Athletic for a long time, but Cody's stuff was very weak post their loss. Like, I'm just gonna put that out there. Maybe I'm supposed to be quiet and not say it, but like, listen, the strike zone is what it is. Rocchio got hosed when he should have walked. Noel got hosed when he should have walked. Like, it was what it was. It was not greatly called the whole game wide. But like, to basically, today's review article was to bring that quote up and then to talk about the 2-2 pitch to Jose. That was, and it was a borderline. Like, that's one that could go either way. Honestly, it touched the bomb zone by strict definition, yes. But sometimes guys like him get a little bit more, but just felt like sour grapes. And it's like, it's weird to see a reporter. Listen, we're not reporters. We're not held by the media standard. We can be fans. Like, a lot of our co-hosts are super fanny, and we try to pull that back a little bit to provide, a good balance. But like, it's weird to me to see it reported in that way. Those quotes just made me go, huh? I thought
McKinstry's quote was weak. I mean, he said it cost in the game. And I know you can sit there and say like, oh, well, if they hadn't given up all those runs in the first inning, maybe the game would have played out differently. But the Tigers didn't score a run. So sorry, man, that also is sour grapes. And maybe you should just say, look, next time I need to make the play or keep the ball in front of me. And
like,
that's guard's ball, man. Guard's ball. And you
take care of business.
Reese Olson came in and threw a hanging slider the first pitch he threw. Lane Thomas jacked it to the moon. Sorry, man. You lost the game. Your pitcher gave up a meatball. You lost the game, and eat it and move on to game 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
and let's be honest, like, there's a good chance to after tomorrow's game, we'll be the ones like feeling sour grapes, but like, we're not going to blame anything else other than like performance unless it's absolutely ridiculous. We're not going to be digging for reasons for failure outside of the game itself.
We will take a look at game 2. First, we'll take a look at the roster. Just give some quick thoughts on the Guardians and Tigers ALDS rosters and how that's going to impact the rest of the series. And then we will get into our thoughts on game 2 and what we expect, which I will say, we don't expect them to score 5 runs in the first inning without getting an out, but wouldn't have said the same thing in game 1 either. And look how that went.
True.
Today's Locked On Guardians is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. We know you want to explore those U.S. cities. We know you want to be there for game 3 in Detroit, if the Guardians have a chance to sweep this series, you can check out hotels with bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, all that kind of stuff. If you want to go move on to the playoffs, maybe you're going to check out something for New York, maybe for Kansas City. That series is very interesting right now. Of course, I've talked about my experiences with Booking.com in Florida after my honeymoon at a very, very last minute event that was terrifying, truthfully. And thank goodness I was able to get a hotel. I think it was like 10 o'clock at night in Jamaica or 6 o'clock at night in Jamaica. I was able to book that hotel and we didn't get in until midnight. I was able to check in late. Booking.com really helped me hook that up. And you also know about my experiences going to Utica for the Jim Thome Hall of Fame induction too. I used that as well in 2018. So I was never familiar with you. I was familiar with Utica. I wouldn't say I liked it before, but you want to know what? I enjoyed the hotel I stayed at thanks to Booking.com. It was a good situation. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals, even Detroit, even Utica. Booking.com, booking.yeah. And let's check out what's going on over at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season, still start it with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you get the hunch in the middle of the Monday night game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I'm looking over right now at FanDuel. I already put a parlay in for Monday's game 2 for the Guardians. I took the Tigers -1.5 because if the Guardians are going to win, I think it's going to be a close game. I did the same thing for game 1, and I'll be honest, I blew it. I also took under 7 runs in that game, and I'm taking under 6.5 in this game as well. I've got Jose hitting a home run because he has good numbers against Skubal. We'll talk about that in the next segment. I got Lane Thomas getting a hit because he hits lefties. I took Matt Vierling to get a hit because he's got some good numbers against lefties, and Boyd's on the mound. I took the under on Skubal and Boyd strikeouts, under 6.5, under 4.5. The Guardians struck out 6 times last time against Skubal. I'm going to trust them with that. I put $10 on that, and my payout could be massive, over $7,000. I'm someone who likes to take the big risks and put a little bit of money down and hope for something big in return. You can get started right now with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. All takes $5. Get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. 4:08. Guardians and Tigers start today. You can check out the action on your SiriusXM app. Search Guardians for that game and any playoff game this postseason on your SiriusXM app by just searching for those teams as well. Very quickly, because we're getting to this late and we want to talk about game 2. The rosters for the Guardians. The big surprise for us was obviously Tyler Freeman. He makes it over Angel Martinez. He makes it over
We didn't even mention him.
We did not. And I'll say this makes sense to me now. Freeman is no less equal to Miles Straw offensively when it comes to the bat. He hits the ball harder than Straw. Straw's got terrible exit velocities. Tyler Freeman's exit velocities are not that bad. They're pretty decent. His problem is a lot of ground balls, and it's a very it's a poor approach.
Yeah.
A lot of the Guardians hitters have this issue. He makes a lot of contact on things he just can't hit hard or he can't do damage with, including ground balls. But he probably runs close enough to Straw. He can also cover short in the outfield if you need him to. I think that makes him valuable, and he's right-handed. So that makes him valuable. A little more, I guess, MLB experience than Angel Martinez. So there is that aspect of things. I was surprised by that one.
More time at center
omissions,
too. Like I think it's about center field depth to a degree.
It is center field depth. I don't know that I would trust Freeman over Lane Thomas in center. I think the end of the game, if you want a good defensive outfield for the Guardians at the end of a close game, I think you want Thomas or Brennan in center or right, one of those two. I'm not sure which one of those is a better center fielder, but you want Brennan out there, and I would rather have Freeman out there than Angel Martinez, truthfully, even though I think Martinez is a solid center fielder. No Lively, no Sandlin. You and I debated Sandlin. We thought he'd be the last guy on.
I didn't think he had any chance. I thought there was the last guy on it.
That's true. I think you did say he was an omission for you. I thought he'd make it just because they had counted on him this year a lot. But he didn't, and I think that's the right call. They kept Cantillo like we talked about, and they kept Sobrowski. They didn't have Lively on. Some people were surprised by that. I wasn't. I didn't think there was any room for him to pitch. He wasn't going to start any of those 3 games. And Cobb is on the roster, which means they feel like he's going to make the start. I'll tell you right now, Cobb is the probable starter for game 3. They haven't announced it yet, but they will, as long as all 5 of his fingers on his right hand don't have blisters and they work, all that good stuff. So for the Tigers, real quickly too, you mentioned no Casey Mize and no Kenta Maeda. That leaves them very short in terms of length. I'm very surprised no Casey Mize.
Muted. Sorry, my little one just sat up in bed. So I am as well. He's had some ups and downs, but like they're gonna rely on Skubal and then chaos. And yeah, I'm kind of surprised by no Casey Mize too.
Yeah. Peter Montero did make it. All right, let's get into game 2 here. We're probably going to run a little bit long, but that's okay because it's a playoff game and people want to hear more. Hopefully, let's talk about Tarik Skubal against the Guardians. So Tarik Skubal did face the Guardians this year one time. The Tigers won that game. It was against Carlos Carrasco, who was allowed to pitch in the 6th inning, gave too many runs. Not the point. Jose Ramirez is the only Cleveland batter with more than 10 plate appearances against Skubal. It's 22 plate appearances, and he's hitting 429, 455, 667. I'm going to say right now, one of my key factors for game 2, need a big game from Jose. Jose had the call got changed to a double in game 1, the ball that went off McKinstry. First, it was a fielder's choice and an error, which confused me. How it could be both. He didn't get anybody out, but I think Jose needs a big game because all he had was that double in game 1, the double that was, kind of I'm going to say a gift. So he needs a big game in game 2 if they're going to beat Tarik Skubal. Naylor's got 9 plate appearances against him. Hedges has 8. There's not enough plate appearances to go off of to bring in anything meaningful against Skubal. The real question, though, is the arsenal. And Tarik Skubal throws everything. Everything he throws, he does well. The 4-seamer's good. The changeup's disgusting.
Does hit 4-seamers well and changes well, which is why they might have had all of those hits against him last time. It's the cutter and the sinker is their bugaboo.
Yeah, very possible. Lane Thomas is very good against changeups. That's one of Skubal's very best pitches. So I'll be curious to see what he does there. Jimenez typically hits changeups well, but I don't know how he does left-handing against left-handed changeups. I don't know if he'll see that or not. Jose hits changeups well. Josh hits changeups well. Lefties, it's a real question mark. We'll see. David Fry is going to be a big key in game 2 because he does not hit changeups well typically, but they're going to need him. He's going to be in the lineup against him. I wonder if we'll see Austin Hedges. I know some people aren't going to like that call. I kind of wonder if they'll see Austin Hedges, though, because
it's not like Naylor is doing much, though. Like, as much as people...
Yeah.
They're both defensive specialists, and one guy has... We're at it, unfortunately, like you and I thought Bo Naylor was going to be the 3rd most important bat this year. Instead, it was Quan who stepped forward, as well as other players who filled that gap. But it's like Hedges might actually be the better hitter in this situation, which is crazy to say, but it's just because of what he profiles and what gets thrown. And he had a hit last time when they faced him as well, right?
Hedges did. He had a hard hit ball off him, yeah. So, again, nothing meaningful sample size.
Yeah.
The last time the Guardians faced Tarik Skubal, he was pretty heavy on the fastball and sinker, so a lot of heat. And then he went with the changeup after that, and you saw some sliders. He had 15 whiffs in that game against Cleveland. Most of them were the changeups. So I would expect to see a lot of changeups. So, yeah, you're going to want guys like Jose and Lane Thomas to come through in this game against that changeup. And my big thing for them, too, is patience. Like, Skubal is going to make you chase. He's got nasty stuff. This has not been a team, the Guardians, that are very not a patient team. They need to make him work, though. They need to foul pitches off. They need to be patient. They need to make him get the ball up if they're going to have a chance against him. So that means going out there and not having 1 pitch at bats, 2 pitch at bats. You got to at least see, I think, 3 pitches in most of your bats, unless you get a meatball, a hanging changeup, or a middle fastball, in which case you take a rip at it. But I think you got to make Skubal work because it can set you up. Even if they lose game 2, if you go out and you make Skubal work and you get into their bullpen by the 5th inning, this team can come back and not only win game 2, but also decimate them for game 3 because their pitching, their bullpen strategy really didn't work that great in game 1. And in game 3, it puts them behind the 8 ball if you knock Skubal out a little bit early. And even if it goes to game 4, they're still going to be behind the 8 ball. So I say patience versus Skubal, and Jose is a guy who needs a big game against him on Monday.
I really love the idea of patience. We have seen so little of it this year that I'm not sure I believe, and asking them to change on the fly isn't necessarily what we expect either. But if they can, scatter 10 hits and again, it's really hard to duplicate. People get mad at me. It's like, I'm not going in expecting to win tomorrow. I just want to see a good performance. But at the same time, I don't think a win is impossible. It's one of those things I probably put like 80-20 or 70-30 type of situation. But, they've shown me all year. And I do love that they were one of the few, they had probably one of the best outings in some respects in terms of base runners against Skubal all year.
I originally said the Guardians would win game 1 and 2, lose 3 and win 4. I am going to say I'm going to be wrong about that. I think they're going to end up sweeping if they win game 2. If they don't win game 2, obviously they can't sweep. But if they win game 2 against Skubal today, I'm going back and I'm not saying they're going to win they're not going to lose game 3, because if you beat Skubal, I don't think the Tigers have a whole lot of answers 2 days in a row. This is the only time of the series where they're playing back-to-back games. If you beat Skubal in game 1 or game 2, I don't see how the Tigers can recover in game 3, because their entire game 3 plan depends on Skubal winning game 2 so they can have all those guys in reserve. That may not work. And all the Guardians got to do, all you got to do is, I think, score 3 runs. I know Matt Boyd, not 3, I don't know. 4 is the magic number, but Matt Boyd's not going to be allowed to throw that long, I don't think. So you're going to get him out of there at the real first sign of serious trouble.
The game 2 and game 3, there's still a game between. I don't think every single game there's a game between, right? Oh, so you're saying game 3 and game 4 are back to back?
Yeah, 3 and 4 are the only games you're playing back to back.
I was confused for a second.
So Matt Boyd, there's gonna be a day off. Matt Boyd, he may go 3 innings. You may go to Kate Smith in the 4th inning if there's trouble, and piece things together because the day off.
And again, this Tigers team is not strong against lefties. I know Tigers fans like that's a different story over the last month, and it is, but it also isn't, because again, I talk Kerry Carpenter is their second best hitter, and he doesn't play against lefties. You're pulling him out of the lineup. There's a lot of guys that you're pulling out of the lineup, and there's some more variance. And it's like, I think Boyd is set up to be successful as well. It just, I feel like this is, as you smartly bet, it's going to be a close affair.
I said that on Saturday too, and I was wrong. So who knows? Maybe the 12 hits they got against the Tigers the last time they faced Skubal, by your box score bingo, they had 14 base runners. They should have scored 6 runs. That would have lost the game last time.
4.
Oh, okay. If they win 4, if they score 4 runs in this game, I still am confident they would win.
I got to throw out the one stat from our everyday. I said that Emily CK, following an off day, they're 17-6 this year and average 5.8 runs. So according to this data, they should have, if we take away 2, they should score 4 tomorrow, right? 5, rounding up, 5.8 is 6. Take away the 2 extra they scored last week over the 5. It's 4 to 5 runs today. Or when you're listening, that's what should happen based on this stat.
Yeah, 4 or 5 runs, this team wins the game, no doubt.
Yep.
For Matt Boyd, I'm very curious to see what happens, because Matt Boyd has never faced the Tigers. Obviously, he spent his entire career minus a little bit of a year with the Mariners in 2022. Didn't pitch very much for them. So the Tigers hitters have never seen Matt Boyd. Riley
he got
Green,
traded to the Giants? Didn't he have a short bit with them too?
I think it's just Tigers and Mariners and then Cleveland. I think you can look it up. But so Matt Boyd has faced the Tigers twice, I think, ever. The only hitter that's still with the Tigers he's ever seen is Riley Green, and it was 1 plate appearance. So none of the Tigers have any in-box experience against Matt Boyd. However, obviously he spent quite a bit of time with the Tigers, so a lot of these guys might be familiar with him, the person, and know what he throws from being on the side. So I'm very curious to see how much that matters, how much not facing him, but knowing him matters in this game. Boyd this year has been almost 40% fastballs. You got the changeup and the slider. He's featured a lot this year. As we talked about in game 1, this is a fastball team that hits fairly well. but they are not fantastic against changeups. Ibanez is one that hits changeups well. He's a right-handed hitter. He'll be in the lineup. The rest of the guys in this lineup, Gary Carpenter's not going to be in the starting lineup, I would assume. So the rest of them don't do well with changeup, sliders. The same thing. That's why Tanner threw so many sliders. Ibanez is the only slider, and Wenzel Perez. The rest of them really struggle with sliders, so I would expect a lot of sliders. I think as long as Boyd throws strikes and gets them to chase a little bit out of the zone, I think he'll be just fine. But I wouldn't expect more than 4 innings. I'm saying Guardians a 3-2 winner in this game. 3-2.
It always feels like after a team has a bad one, they kind of come back. Boyd's last few starts were some of his least sharp. So for all of my positivity, it's still not a great offense. So against lefties. So I'm going to bet it's something like 4-1 for the Tigers tomorrow. They don't leave him out for too long. They did pull some extra depth in case someone did come up short in one of these games. So I do think the Tigers have a huge advantage tomorrow in this one.
All right. We'll see how that turns out. I was wrong on Saturday how they won, and turned out great. So we'll see. Game 3 probables right now are Alex Cobb versus TBD. I don't know. Tigers.
I think it's Bobrisky. That's my guess. It's Bobrisky.
Yeah,
has had
literally
the most
they
starts.
Used Keter Montero on Saturday, so by Wednesday he won't be on full rest. Maybe they'll be able to get something out of him and just say we're not going to throw him on full rest. It is what it is. But after that, they don't have a whole lot of depth. So even if the Guardians win game or lose game 2 today, they're still in good shape for game 3, and maybe they end up doing the 1-1 and win 2 in Detroit. Either way, I don't think this series comes back to Cleveland. I think it ends in Detroit with the Guardians winning, but we'll see. I just think the Tigers pitching plans will run out of steam. That's all we've got for you today. So we'll be back with you on Tuesday reviewing game 2 and, of course, previewing game 3 on Wednesday.
I want to thank all of you who joined, especially to the new Tigers fans. 99% of you were very
hate
kind.
This episode.
So you're going to hate this episode, but I just want to say thank you for those who stuck through. 99% of you were kind. If they weren't facing Cleveland, I would be rooting for the Tigers against anyone else in this postseason. I got to be honest. Yeah, it's a fun young team. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to all of our regulars. Thank you to everyone. Thursday was our biggest video ever that is not a live stream. So thank you to everyone who's been joining us. We love and appreciate all of you. And go Guardians, go. And I forgot to do the exit video, so here you go. Ooh, we are a well-oiled machine like the Guardians. Go Guardians, go for a second time.